And as always, we leave you with our Everybody Has a Story interview segment. This week, Cody Pomeranz sat down with world-renowned economist Jeffrey Sachs to discuss foreign aid and his role in the fight to end global poverty.
Professor Sachs, thanks for being here.
Great to be with you, thanks.
So you're participating in a debate tonight, I understand, at the Yale Political Union about global poverty and the effectiveness of foreign aid. So I want to start there. Last year, World Bank President Jim Yong Kim announced the goal of ending extreme global poverty by 2030. I know you proposed 2025 in your book, The End of Poverty. Is that a feasible goal? Is his plan too bold at this point?
Well, I was thrilled, as you can imagine, that the World Bank officially took this on. And I think it shows that even sometimes pretty conservative governments say, you know, we have a shot at that. It's a stretch goal. One would have to work very hard, not only at the bank, but in an organized way globally to achieve it. Nothing about ending poverty is certain, but it's not impossible. And when you have an issue that could do so much good, if we really make the effort, I think we should try to make the effort.
There seems to be this misconception. There was a 2010 poll where Americans were asked, how much do you think America spends on foreign aid? And the average answer was 27%. And how much should we spend? 13%. The reality is less than 1%.
Well, thank you for putting it. The basic point that's been true for 20, 25 years, I talked about it in The End of Poverty, is that it's roughly a 30-fold exaggeration. And Americans would like to give a lot more than we're actually giving, but they say we should cut because they think we're giving so much more than is actually the case. And I blame the politicians in general for this. I find them pretty unimpressive, I have to say. Washington is almost off my visitor list. I go pretty rarely because I find it almost useless to go. But I find the politicians not brave and not honest with the American people. They don't like to talk about subjects like this, and they should. They should explain the truth. And the odd part is, I can tell you, I recommended the AIDS program that George W. Bush ended up adopting. I was probably the first person into the White House in early 2001 recommending a major U.S. AIDS program. At the time, I was told impossible. 2 years later, the government adopted it. It became President Bush's shining legacy in Africa, and it became one of his proudest achievements. I would have told him that right at the beginning. This would be a great thing. At low cost, you can save millions of lives. He came to learn that. I think President Obama should be doing a lot more on this than we've been doing. I find this a big mistake of Washington. And I don't think the American people would oppose it if they really understood how much is involved. And by the way, I'd like to tax a lot of rich people, financial transactions and bankers' bonuses and hedge fund owners and the money that Google and Amazon and Apple ought to be paying, but instead have in the Cayman Islands or Bermuda. Come on, there are plenty of ways to get this money. And I would stop the war in Afghanistan many years ago. We would have saved hundreds of billions of dollars that could have saved a lot of lives instead of wasting the money we've been saving, that we've been wasting. So had we spent the money properly, the American people would have stood up and said, hooray, this is our values, this is what we want to do. The world would have been a better place.
Sure, but you talk about American attention span, the attention span of the media. But it's one thing to pledge foreign aid, but it seems to be a whole other thing to actually get the money there. People talk about corrupt governments, taking the money. But what about cases where the governments, even the United States, doesn't get the money in there? Jonathan Katz's...
Why do you say even the United States? I sometimes say, sure, there's corruption everywhere, not just in Washington. We have one of the most corrupt governments I know right now. Of course, it's legal corruption in the United States. They go out and they spend all day asking rich people to give them money for their campaign, and we call that normal democracy.
Do big promises tend to, people see that we're going to pledge $8.4 billion to Haiti? And, I was saying John Katz's new book, The Big Truck That Went By, How the World Came to Save Haiti and Left Behind a Disaster, talks about how most of that money never got there. A lot of the money that did get there went to, the Department of Defense and repairing helicopters and, $4,000 for a fat fryer. So how, if you're an average citizen in the United States, how do you know if the money you donate to the Red Cross or your taxpayer money is going to the people that you are trying to help?
It's a great question, and I got to read that book. I haven't read that book. Haiti is a debacle, and most of the money pledged wasn't real money; it was just vapor anyway. So it was politicians making speeches, but it's pretty sobering, actually. Former President Bill Clinton was responsible for leading that effort. I could see that was not going well from the beginning. I kept urging that it should be more professional, more systematic, better designed, but it never got that way. And I think that that is a very serious problem. I'm not in favor of aid per se. I'm in favor of professionalized aid that gets to where it needs to go. And I'm afraid that in Haiti, they botched it. And you could see I could see that it was being botched. By the way, we didn't waste a lot of money because the money was mostly just speeches, not real money. But boy, did we waste time. And did we lose an opportunity to help Haiti after the earthquake. And I believe that this was very bad performance on the part of the U.S. It was disorganized. You could see it. It was very amateurish. A lot of people running around that didn't really know what they were doing. No, of course, this should be a lot more systematic. Sometimes it is. Often it's not. The aid, so-called, that we've given to Afghanistan, pathetic. The aid, so-called, in Iraq, pathetic. So I don't want to just leave poor people to die because the government botches these things. I want to professionalize the aid, get it done properly, get it to where it needs to go. The kind of aid that I've advocated and helped to design, like the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, TB, and Malaria, works. That can be replicated in many, many ways. But it's true. Leave it to the Department of Defense, forget it. Leave it to some photo ops of politicians, it's not going to work.
Professor Jeffrey Sachs, thanks so much for
joining
us. Thank you. As always, thank you for joining us. For YTV, I'm Cody Pomeranz. See you next time.
To see the full interview, visit YaleDailyNews.com/YTV under the features page.